Hey, it's a good day around here.
It is a good day.
We've got a legend. If you're in healthcare philanthropy, you're going to know this legend that I'm talking about.
It's pretty much the godfather of healthcare philanthropy. And I am so humbled that in a world with social media and technology, you can literally reach out to someone that is such a megastar via LinkedIn and say, hey, I know you and I love the person that you are and the culture you've built. Will you come be on our podcast? And the living legend says yes.
And then no, the living legend also, this is my personal story with Bill. You know, he is like one of the most just generous people with his time also. Mm-hmm. And so several years ago, our leadership team at the healthcare philanthropy we're sitting around and looking at implementing some best practices, and Sharp Healthcare, which is who Bill Littlejohn, our guest today, he's the senior VP and CEO of Sharp Healthcare Foundation. We're looking at everything that they're doing, and I want to unpack some of the amazing things that they have done. But we're looking and we're saying, you know, we really just need to pick Bill's brain about how to do this here. And he not only took our call, but invited us to fly out to San Diego and meet with him in person. So it was just such a great, generous gesture to just really share lessons learned. And it's just part of his fabric. And he's just been such an invaluable resource to our community too. So I'd like to introduce you to Bill. We're honored that he's here with us today. He is really one of the nation's leading healthcare philanthropy professionals, more than 3 decades of experience. He has led and directed philanthropic programs that have generated nearly $1 billion. I almost cut you half in half there, Bill. At Sharp alone, more than $300 million in philanthropy. I know we got to visit with him about his $100 million campaign that closed fairly recently called Inspire, which was this incredible comprehensive effort that united more than 24 different initiatives, very complex but very impactful program. But Bill also consults and facilitates with board retreats and conferences and site visits. He is a key player in our industry conference, AHP. You got to meet Alice Ayers last season in season 1 of our podcast. And Bill actually won the top award, the Cy Seymour Award, for the highest recognition for professional development in our industry. So just a powerhouse. I could keep going, but I really just want you to meet Bill. And so, Bill, welcome to the podcast. So glad you're here.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Julie. It's great to be here. I'll be here actually in my office. It's kind of a rarity these days in what we're dealing with in 2020. But I guess I could be doing this anywhere. I could be doing this at home. I could be doing it sort of on my device in the car. But it's really valuable to be together and to see each other, which is wonderful. So I'm delighted to be here. And as I've said, I always enjoy taking time and sharing with colleagues. And we in this aspect, we receive and give as much as we do with each other. So it's just wonderful to be together today.
And I also think we should give a shout out to Bill, to everybody who's out in healthcare philanthropy right now, because talk about working on the front lines of this pandemic. And I know California right now is shut down, and we're just really grateful for all that you and your teams are doing to help bring great care to people who are so desperately need it right now.
Yep, great people doing great things every day, and we said that, that we saw incredible response to COVID-19 for us. And, but we also, said that, this is what we do every day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, no matter the crisis. So when this is over, we'll still be working 24 hours a day, and people will be caring for others. So I think it was sort of really instructive for people to understand the value of a community hospital and the people in a community hospital. I think that really struck me that, this is an unprecedented year, but for this last year, every single hospital in America was the same, no matter where you were, because they were the front lines of taking care of people with COVID-19 and also taking care of their community. And I think this was this great aspect of stronger together. We're all in this together. The aspect that we were all joined together, which was kind of a unique dynamic. You don't want to see it again, right. But it was very powerful. And I think it also brought a new sort of perspective to the incredible importance of community healthcare, hospitals, the people who work there. And of course, philanthropy has an important element of allowing people to do great things. So it's been an incredibly challenging year, but also very rewarding, I think, too, from the standpoint of the aspect of communities responding to their institutions in time of need.
I agree. And I think, you brought up such a great point that it did level the playing field of all of us. A incredible system like Sharp compared to a smaller system in the middle of America here in Oklahoma. Like, there's so much that we can learn from each other. And I think that this year has opened the door on that. So I hope that that is true of our convo today. Mm-hmm. Bill works at such a macro scale. And I know there's all types of listeners listening today, but there is so much truth of just how to organize yourself well and how to become a really dynamic, really effective team. And that's what we want to lean into, Bill, today. But I'd love to kick it to you first, just to share, Bill, a little bit of your career journey and your work now at Sharp.
I've said this to people, if you had told me when I graduated from the University of Virginia in 1980 with a degree of economics that I'd be doing the fundraising for a hospital system in San Diego, I thought you went to too many of those fraternity parties that I went to, and crazy things that went on. But it's been a great journey, and it's been more than 3 decades. It's been 35 or so years, and I've always had this aspect of community bent and organization. Growing up in Washington D.C., and my father worked for the government, and I was involved in volunteer activities at school and things like that. And Jordan's just sort of wound my way, ultimately starting at the American Cancer Society, where I got a great kind of fundraising background, did all kinds of community activities and things, and just really kind of learned and cut my teeth on it. And then had the opportunity to consult in healthcare philanthropy with a colleague who actually also was a University of Virginia graduate years before me, but we ended up working together for 10 years. And that was sort of the turning point or dynamic where, one, I got to work in a lot of different places. And it was primarily hospitals and healthcare systems, and it was doing big projects and campaigns and studies. And I remember my first big campaign was in 1992. That's 28 years ago now, at Methodist Hospital of Southern California in the Los Angeles area. And it was one of those just great experiences for a couple of years of doing everything as it relates to a fundraising campaign. And back then you didn't do a video, you had slides in a carousel, and you had, you had transparencies that you put on an overhead projector.
Oh my gosh.
It seems like a zillion years ago, but it was so invigorating to see that, to go everything from the sort of a plan on a piece of paper to standing there at the ribbon cutting and seeing the facility that the community had helped make possible. I thought, for me to be able to facilitate that dynamic, or be part of that, was just so rewarding. And I said that set my career in motion. That was what I wanted to stay focused on, was, projects and initiatives that help transform communities and institutions, and to help facilitate that. And I think that's where, I went from the standpoint of thinking, oh, I'm just a fundraising person. And I even think of myself today as the chief investment officer at Sharp Healthcare, where I work to help the community invest in the future of their healthcare by supporting Sharp Healthcare, which builds buildings and purchases technology and does research and training, that ultimately that improves the health of the community. So I'm a facilitator of that incredible dynamic and legacy. And I think that professionally has really sort of kept me in motion, and has been such a great reward, is that. And so, I never would have thought that was my career path, but the alignment came, and I have relished it since I started.
I really appreciate just hearing you tell that story in that way, because it almost just made me feel like we're hearing about the time that Bill fell in love, and he fell in love with a career. And we talk about legacy so much in this business, and we really have to think of ourselves as the legacy moderators. I mean, what we are doing to help build community, whether you're in social services or you're in higher ed, I mean, this is legacy building work. And I just think you're perfectly suited for it with your personality. And I think one of the things we've always appreciated about Sharp is just how strategic that you all are. And so I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about the intentionality of syncing your development plans with strategic plans. And I think that can be a very intimidating thing for a lot of organizations, but I think that's also where you see huge gains, huge opportunities, and huge ways for people to plug in, companies to plug in, foundations to plug in, to be a part of the really big vision that you're trying to cast for your community. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. And I am an evangelist and preacher and whatever you call it for strategic philanthropy. That, I always, I'm in the fundraising business and philanthropy business, but I work at Sharp Healthcare, and Sharp Healthcare is this incredibly valuable community asset. You made a great point, Becky, to talk about the aspect of how important these organizations are and legacies are to them. And the end of the day is that, and that the aspect of investment. So Sharp Healthcare, this large healthcare delivery network in San Diego, has a vision and plan to improve the health of the community. That's its mission, to improve the health of the community with a commitment to excellence. Well, the only way in which to do that is to make investments, is to be successful, to achieve that vision. And so I think what it became really important is that we weren't just a fundraising arm because we're nonprofit and we provide charity care, which I think a lot of times you think, oh, we are charity, so give to the charity. And of course, we're an incredibly powerful and important charity. But the aspect that we think of then philanthropy as an investment tool for Sharp to achieve a vision, not for so much itself, for its mission to serve the community. So ultimately, people, when they make philanthropic investments to Sharp and giving, they're giving really back to themselves. And so the alignment that we have of the aspect of philanthropy as a powerful dynamic to allow the institution to achieve its vision is critically important. And we've done that now for many years, and that's even the aspect that we share that impact of philanthropy more so than sort of what we raise. It's the aspect of what we do with the money. We're just the vehicle to help facilitate that. And ultimately, I talk about myself as I'm the largest donor to Sharp because we sign the checks that ultimately go over to do the things, whether it is purchase a new robot, build a cancer center, train a nurse, provide a navigation program. That's what happened because that's part of Sharp's vision and plan for serving the community. I think that is really important, especially in healthcare. They're very large, complex organizations, like you've said. And it's important for the community to understand how incredibly valuable their partnership is. We might generate significant amounts of net income, but we don't have stock, and we've got to have the resources to provide for the future of healthcare. So we have been very well aligned there on our strategy and plans. And another really important element of that, that we talk about fundraising, we talk about development. Why, the aspect, you're a director of development or a vice president. Development is development of relationships over time. And I think that's also the aspect of strategic philanthropy, and also something I'm very proud of, is to see the maturity of the development program of those relationships. I've been at Sharp now 20 years, and I am so incredibly proud and respectful of these wonderful relationships who have been our partners now, who've created legacies over those 2 decades. And more than anything, what they will do, they will inspire, the name of our campaign, future legacies. Inspiration is the essence of philanthropy. People are inspired to do great things. A plan helps, a vision from an institutional leadership helps, but ultimately it's philanthropists that provide that giving, that investment, that more than anything, not just providing for the cancer center, it inspires others to join them. I mean, there's just this incredible dynamic that I think that's sort of part of my job, is to facilitate, choreograph, to appreciate, to understand that, so that ultimately everyone benefits.
I love that. I mean, from Becky and I being in healthcare philanthropy on the front lines of fundraising / development, you have made something that's incredibly complex sound so simple, and I think that is this task before us in fundraising in healthcare, is just to to make it seem simple to be able to make that impact, because you are doing the legwork to help kind of connect the dots and get the right players and be toned into the strategy.
Well, and you brought up our Inspire campaign. So, and I can talk more about that, but, we use that term inspiration of philanthropy, that money sort of begets money. And it was incredibly powerful. And so during that campaign, talk about keeping kind of it simple. So, we have a foundation board, and we have foundation board meetings, and people have lots to talk about, what happens at a meeting and whether they're exciting or boring or long and dreary, and there's big tabs of stuff, and during that campaign, rather than begin with sort of approving the minutes like many meetings do, we start with a story of inspired giving.
Yep.
And it's just 5 minutes or 4 or 8, and it might be a doctor, a nurse, a patient. It might be a small gift or a major gift. Whatever it is, there's a story there. Every gift has a story. And that we tell that story in front of the 50 people in the board room, or now we do it and we still do it on Zoom. Talk about sort of impacting the culture and the dynamic of not just the meeting for 90 minutes, but when people walk out.
And
they've been inspired. And
yes.
The tone, exactly. And so in the end, they said, that's our job, is to share stories of inspired giving that will inspire others. So a big complex plan, yes, we have it, but we can get it down to a 5-minute story that the CEO is there and physicians are there and board members, and they're inspired when they leave for us to facilitate the next opportunity. And you're exactly right, John. Lots of complexity in our plans, but we're able to bring it down to a point where that 5 minutes changes 90 minutes, changes the next 2 months of our work to the next meeting, and on it goes. And so we can have a very big 5-year strategic plan, but it's made up of elements that we can manage effectively. Sharp has a great sort of, wins along the way is what we talk about. You've got a big goal, but you get a win. And every time you do that, sharing that philanthropic story will undoubtedly inspire others.
I love where this conversation's going, because I think when people think about strategic plans, at least this is probably at least how I would see it through the lens of when I was a young professional and I was kind of tuning into it, it just seems, the scope of it seems so verbose, and it seems so wide, and it's so complex. And at the end of the day, you're right. Our why is that person, is that story that we're telling at the back end. And so even if it is completely complex, the mission is so simple and concrete. And I just think that storytelling ability, if you do it well, and I think what you've just said, and I don't want anybody to miss it, is putting it on the front end of what you're doing, because the tone of what that sets for that meeting is, we may not all agree in this meeting about what we're going to do and the steps to get to how we're going to get to accomplish our goal, but the why is something we are all circled around, and it's something we all want to perpetuate. And I just think that there are some really good takeaways on what you're saying about partners here, because I can't think of any other industry other than healthcare where you could be gifting to an area that will eventually serve you, that will save you, that will treat someone that you love. And so an investment in your community and keeping that narrative going, I mean, it is incumbent upon us as development professionals to continue telling that story. And if it's a story about a patient, or if it's a story about the need that you have, that is a story that we have to keep weaving and keeping in front of our community partners, because it's going to be a story that's going to be threaded in their life at some point. So I think there's a lot of good takeaways here. So I won't stop your momentum.
Well, I was going to say, we have big, complex strategic plans. I was going to pull out of my cabinet here. It's about a foot thick, and that.
Yes.
But there's an important element of that. And I think this is really important for the development function, the philanthropy function, especially like in healthcare, that we are the storytellers. So it's our job to take that complex strategic plan and put it sort of into the language of storytelling and vision and dreams that people have for accomplishing things. And then we can focus our work on that. And the end of the day, in the end of the day, I tell that to the board, or I've done that in board retreats. I say, tell me what your vision is for healthcare in your community for the next decade. Is it about access? Is it about more beds? Is it about better treatment? Is it about technology. What is it that you see that you need to do? Then I said, now what are the investments required to achieve that? Well, now it becomes our job to sort of craft that case for support. You mentioned that, John, in Inspire, we had 24 initiatives. So what it was, that was all in Sharp's strategic plan, and it was us to tell those stories for the cancer center or for robotic surgery or for patient navigation, and to have those patients and family members align with that and say, gosh, I appreciate that. And so this complexity came narrowed down. And the other thing that I think is really important for us, and I've said this, is that no matter how big and complex our fundraising program is, there's only 3 ways you raise money. And I'm not talking about playing golf and doing special events, which we do. We play a lot of golf in San Diego, which is great. You acquire, you retain, you grow. You acquire a relationship by storytelling, by engaging, by doing an event. You get someone to give because they understand what you want. You acquire, you send out direct mail, whatever you do. Now, the second objective is to retain those relationships. And then the third is to grow them over time, why it's called development. You want to be doing all 3 really well all at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that's really what our strategic approach is to acquire lots of patients and family members who come alongside us with gifts, acquiring a relationship, retaining those, stewarding, cultivating, educating, sharing impact, everything from taking people on a tour. Now we do it virtually on Zoom. And then growing that relationship, making them investors, having them create their next legacy. So that's my job, is to facilitate that. So even though we have a complex plan, it can be narrowed down. I think all of us can do that in focus, whether it's the institutional plan or our own plan, and understand what our role is to facilitate that.
And Bill, I love that you are the torchbearer of using the word investment. And I've heard it several times in this conversation and in previous conversations with you. I think that is a very forward way of thinking about development, and the way specifically that you position the Inspire campaign. I love how you use leverage to talk about Sharp's investment alongside donors' investment. So I wonder if you would kind of share that, how you did that, because I think it was really unique and powerful.
That's a really great question and point, because we get into talking about investment grade philanthropy and people making investments versus giving just charity or based on need. And so the idea of giving to a vision to achieve something versus, we don't have enough money to pay for this. And certainly that's a part of philanthropy and nonprofit organizations. I mean, there's that, but at the end of the day, if you can articulate sort of vision, then you really can go toward that investment grade dynamic. And I think you can also look at it in 2 ways. Is that we talk a lot in fundraising. You read about it, about overhead and cost of fundraising. We really flip that around to thinking about a return on investment. And in fact, the philanthropic arm at a place like Sharp is very profitable to Sharp Healthcare. They invest in me and our organization, and we return many times over those funds. Yes. Well, I go to the board and say, if you give me $1 board and I give you $4 back, when do you stop giving me dollars?
Like take it to Shark Tank.
And that's the aspect of resource investment, of being very, not costly, but profitable. Now we even flip that further with donors, because Sharp is a very successful, well-run organization. It generates net income. That profit goes to new cancer centers and new technology. And we borrow effectively, so we borrow money to build our big buildings and projects. And we use philanthropy. So now we have a greater investment story, ROI, the return on investment for donors. We say, if you give us $1, Sharp will invest 8 more or 9 more. You will get back $10 of improved healthcare in your community. You have made you've given us an incredibly valuable investment that we've matched many times over through our hard work. And your partnership now is delivering to this community and to you whatever we're investing in. So when we did Inspire, that was $100 million of philanthropy. The Sharp strategic plan was about $680 million at the time. And now we're organizing a $250 million comprehensive campaign for a $1.5 to $2 billion investment plan.
Unbelievable.
So, but that's the also aspect of development over time. And tenure and staying with it and seeing the program mature through acquisition and retention and strategy. Where my first big campaign at Sharp was 50 million, and we ended up raising 60, and then we did Inspire, and now we're taking on. But Sharp's investment strategy has grown too, and its success, and so we're still that incredibly important strategic partner. So our donors are those key investors, and I think they really understand that from the standpoint that they value that Sharp is a successful, well-run healthcare enterprise. We share with them when we have our bond rating upgraded because of how well we operate, because that means our borrowing is less expensive, which means their philanthropic support is even more valued and leveraged. I mean, I think, people give, especially large gifts, they give them to successful, well-run enterprises. They might bail you out sometime if you got a problem, but they won't do it for 20 years. So I think that's really important, and that's where that whole strategy and alignment has come in. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us as development professionals is to challenge the boards and ask the boards and the leadership and say, tell me what that plan is, because I want to go share it with the community. I want to be your spokesperson to share this great vision and have people invest in it. So it really has changed our culture really dramatically.
I bet.
Yeah,
I mean, this is exactly what we talk about within this company, which is you have got to play the long game if you are in this for the long haul. And thinking about campaigns within the structures of we're trying to raise $100 million is small thinking. We've got to be thinking about how the $100 million gets us to the next $250 million. How do we, go to $500 million from there? And I can just see how this smart approach, and again, it's about, the story is about partnership.
Well, and I think it's also about, you mentioned, it's about legacy. And I think, that's another thing in that I'm sort of the resident historian for Sharp Healthcare. And I know the entire history of the organization, which is important to know because much of it has philanthropy in key elements along the way, including how we got our name. It was a $500,000 gift from Thomas E. Sharp, who made a gift in memory of his son who died in World War II. And to think that a group of people, about a dozen people, got together in downtown San Diego after World War II to help, to plan to build a new hospital, and started with a $500,000 gift, and now it's a $4 billion enterprise with 20,000 employees. Talk about legacy, power of legacy. I mean, it's sort of incomprehensible that, and it's still it's a community organization that's governed by a community board of directors. There's still dissent. Actually, there is on our immediate past board chair of our foundation. Her grandfather chaired the first campaign for the first hospital that Sharp built.
Oh, that's
Wow.
cool.
That's awesome.
And so, that's legacy. And so I think that's a really important element, and you tie sort of strategy to legacy. And the end of the day is that you create a legacy for future generation to appreciate, and then they come alongside. And it's not just one legacy. You need to have that generational dynamic. So important to have strategy because, and it's like we saw that is that we had people from our first campaign go on to give, in the Inspire, and we know they'll be part of giving in or their family members will be. So it's, and I think, but it's also just the fact that we're so closely aligned with Sharp and its vision and plans. It makes, I don't know if its job is easier, but it allows us to facilitate these incredible engagements where people really feel part of what's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, Bill, you've given just such a beautiful playbook of if you want to go to the next level, these are the type of conversations you've got to be having. This is the kind of strategy you've got to have locked down to have these kind of visionary investor type conversations with major donors. What I love about the Sharp story, though, is that if you're in healthcare, you've heard about Sharp's entry point campaign, is what I would say, is probably the most well-known thing for Sharp is your grassroots efforts known as Guardian Angel. And if you're in healthcare, you've probably replicated it.
We did.
You probably said, hey, can I see the
Yeah.
brochure so I can copy that? Because they do this so well. And Bill has talked about the 3 types of donors. This is their acquisition strategy. This is how they get people involved in the mission. And so will you tell that story of how y'all do it? Because it's incredible.
I always talk about the power of the pyramid too in healthcare philanthropy. That you got three parts of the pyramid. One is the money side, where you earn, borrow, ask, and one is the strategy of telling the story and the case development, and the third is connecting through care, and that's where Guardian Angel comes in, and that is the foundation facilitating gratitude between caregiver and patient/donor. And people have always been grateful for their care in hospitals. I mean, it's part. We have scrapbooks filled with these beautiful handwritten notes from patients from the back of the 1950s and 60s, when people still wrote notes instead of texting or whatever they did. Or and it was just these wonderful stories. Oh, the nurses on the 7th floor were just wonderful, and it's just so we know we've had that gratitude within us. And I think what it was when we developed the Guardian Angel program, it would say, let's give, rather than, they can still write a note, but let's give those patients an opportunity to make a difference in the organization and their care in the future by making a gift in recognition of a caregiver. And it sort of was slow to start, but it really was, is that it's doing something we've always had part of our culture and dynamic is appreciate, and we saw it greatly in COVID.
Oh, I'm
heroes,
sure.
Healthcare heroes, and there's great stories we have there. But the aspect of being able to say thank you to a nurse, a doctor, a housekeeper, somebody in the cafeteria, the concierge, we finance people. It became the aspect that I want to say thank you, and I want to also give as well, because I understand the value of my gift going to make a difference. It wasn't just giving to Sharp. And so now 60,000 Guardian Angels later.
60,000.
Oh
with
gosh.
physicians, some physicians that have received 500 or more. The culture change has been dramatic. And what it is brought to the surface is just how people feel and how they appreciate, and that they have an ability to express gratitude. But it also has then the impact on the caregiver from the standpoint of they now see sort of how fundraising and philanthropy work as well, that they just do great things, and all of a sudden they get a recognition that someone gave $100 to, help make a difference. And so that has now infused the entire organization. That is just, you see employees wearing pins all down their lapel of their lab coat, and physicians and gold, and it's just been incredibly wonderful, and just such great. And they take pictures and they share messages. And so what it is that it's the idea, it's bringing to the surface this incredibly powerful gratitude dynamic. And you see a lot of that being written about, the power of gratitude. This is just being demonstrably expressed. And of course, it is developing relationships for us. You're exactly right, John. We've acquired thousands upon thousands of relationships, and we've had, I'll relate one story that related to COVID. So we had a couple that were longtime patients at Sharp, and a number of years ago, they made I think 2 Guardian Angel gifts, one for $50 and one for $100. Well, we also found out later that they had included Sharp in their trust, which we didn't know at the time, but they love their doctors and they love the organization. Well, they passed away a couple of years ago, and had left us about $400,000 in 2 aspects of the trust, and they were restricted for some unique programs they wanted to accomplish, and we had to do some work on that. Well, COVID came along in March and April, and so we had this huge need for what, especially the medical group needed. They needed to do test kits, not for COVID, but colorectal cancer, and they did some food insecurity. So I went back to the trustee of their estate and said, this is what's happening right now. Would it be appropriate for us to be able to redesignate those funds for the COVID-19 purposes? And both the trustee and the family members just could not say no, and could not say yes fast enough. They said, absolutely do this. And then we did that, and then we told their story, and we have the picture of the couple now in a newsletter. And so here was a couple, gave a couple of small gifts, but they valued the relationship over time enough to make a legacy gift. That legacy gift has now impacted hundreds, not thousands of patients during COVID-19.
This is what it's all about.
It's all, I mean, it just, and all, again, we did was facilitate that. We facilitated the guardian angel gifts, and we did good stewardship with the family and the trustees of the legacy. We found the appropriate designation, and ultimately the community has benefit in that, and now the family members can sort of have this sort of pride that their parents, that this was something that they'll never, and we will never forget. We have a legacy we've created, and that started with a small contribution in honor of a physician.
I love that we're having this grateful patient talk, and I think that you also did something here that I don't want anybody to miss, which is a lot of people might look at a gift like that and say, oh no, it was restricted in this way, we can't use it in that way. You went further and said, I'm going to call him, and I'm going to and the end result to me is a deeper relationship with this donor family. And while this couple has since left the earth and left this beautiful legacy behind, you are continuing to nurture and show this family what a gift to Sharp means, and that you want to keep making this gift relevant. And that, I think that is a brilliant hack, that we just can't get stopped, just because someone has passed away. These gifts, it is incumbent upon us to continue to seek out the best ways to have the gift move in the spirit in which it was given. And when we talk about grateful patients, I mean, I think everybody that is in a nonprofit has, I'm using my air quotes, grateful patients. If you are in a higher ed, you've got alums. If you are in a social services group, you have people who have benefited. I mean, if there are people that have benefited from your services, I call them grateful patients. And why would we not just give them a microphone? This would be just a hack for anybody at home.
Right.
Is why wouldn't you just ask them, what has your experience here meant to you? Because I think that could just open a door that you could have never imagined what the impact would be for that individual. And there's a story right there that you share at the beginning of your board meeting.
Yeah, and I'm really hopeful that it's really interesting in healthcare philanthropy. It's a challenge. Healthcare is a very complex, big industry, and understanding the financial dynamics of healthcare are almost impossible these days. I mean, it's incredibly complex, and so that created a challenge in philanthropy. People thought, well, you got plenty of money, you got big buildings, you charge a lot for your services, I pay my taxes to Medicare. I mean, it's all those questions people would have. And here, what happened in COVID is it came down to basically, the street. Here was this hospital that was the center of the community at the time, and people said, and that's what we saw, people bringing food to the door, and people, they wanted to help because they. And I think it was somewhat of a sort of shockwave that, but we've been here for 75 years. We've been doing this every day. And I think I'm hopeful that there might be a new kind of appreciation or understanding how valuable these assets are in the community. That, again, it's not any more valuable than a museum or a school, but it is this, and it's here because people made it happen here. And they still govern it, and they still care for it, and they steward it. And we as a community, all communities, need to sort of be responsible to that if that's what you want in the future. And so I think there's a great opportunity to it's not so much crisis sort of fundraising, but the value of healthcare in our communities, no matter how big you are, a system. Ultimately, people still go to a clinic, they go to a hospital. That's they see a doctor, they see a nurse. It gets quite simple on that. I think so. We're hopeful that it might be kind of a new era in our dynamic.
Bill, you have just given us, Becky said this once, I'll say it again, a master class on leadership and leaning in the year of COVID. Could you give us, we ask all of our guests to give us one good thing, and that is a piece of advice or a hack to success, or maybe it's a discipline or habit. What would be your one good thing?
I've said this, people ask us, and we all come from different backgrounds in our profession, which is great. It's a wonderful dynamic. And there's three characteristics that I think for fundraising philanthropy professionals to consider. One is people skills, and that's articulation, that is engagement. It's not just sort of being friendly or social. It's just having the ability to interact with people. A work ethic, just get out there and put the Nike poster up and do it. And attention to detail. The ask is the tip of the iceberg, what goes on underneath and how you choreograph and then do that dynamic, whether it's in COVID or not, is that, and I think that, and there's a big difference between philanthropy and fundraising. Fundraising is the function, the tactic. And I'm a fundraising professional, sure, but I'm an officer for philanthropy. And what I'm probably most proud of now, after 35 years, is, I can walk through the hall of the hospitals at Sharp, and I know a lot of the doctors and nurses and leaders. And I just value the respect that they have for me. That's nice. But the respect they have for the role that I occupy, that and appreciation for the role, not just Bill, the role that the foundations have in doing what we just talked about, is facilitating vision. I think that I'm very proud. I have a lot of pride when we do the ribbon cutting, but I'm so proud that the people who are the beneficiaries of philanthropy value and appreciate those who help facilitate it.
Oh, that was
It's
profound.
powerful. Yeah, and I was going to actually draw attention to this earlier because I think in your role, it's very unique that you have a part to play of bringing others along inside the organization about the power of philanthropy, because you're dealing with controllers and like medical folks, and all of us have people on the team that just don't understand development. And this is our opportunity to show them the way.
I mean, that's part of why we're storytellers. And we're not we have to articulate case, and we have to have the ability to engage effectively and sort of share vision and talk about legacy and about impact.
It's so clear to me why you are such a seasoned veteran and such a just well-respected professional in this industry, because you just have such a kindness about you. You really do have that really large forecasting vision, and I can just see that threaded throughout everything that you're saying. So I really value this conversation. How can people connect with you, Bill, get to know a little bit about Sharp? Where are you on social?
Yep, everybody's connected these days, right? So actually, you can go on to Sharp has a website, www.sharp.com. But also, I don't know if you'll share with it, but you can contact me. My email is pretty simple. It's bill.littlejohn@sharp.com. I mean, you can't miss it. And I think please do, because I value that more than anything. I do that today. I'll have a Zoom meeting, or I'll have a conference, or just chat with people, on any topic at all, because I always say we all learn from each other. And so, and I think, our programs are like snowflakes. No two are alike. And so we can pick up, we still have the same objectives. But, our communities and organizations are somewhat different at times. So, yes, please get in touch. And when the time is right, come out to San Diego.
Oh, I love San Diego.
Come back out here. It's sunny today, and it's in the middle of December, and we're looking forward to that. Actually, we have a project we're doing right now, which is to create a new corporate center that will have a great conference and education facilities and patient simulation labs and things like that. So we're anticipating that. So we'd love to host a group. If you have a group you want to come out and spend a day, we'd love to set something up, and let's think outside the box and set up a conference out here, and you guys can host, and we'll help facilitate and bring people in.
Okay, so we'll be there in a couple weeks. Thanks for just being someone that's a light in this space and lifts up others. You are one of the giants of whose shoulders we will all be standing on. So appreciate your time so much today, and I think that Mr. Sharp would just feel that his son was honored so well and the wonderful legacy that you've created. So appreciate your time and storytelling. It's been a gift.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks for you guys for hosting it, and congratulations on all your success. And continue to do this, because I think I'll be able to learn a lot from what you're doing as well. I know we'll stay connected on that.
You're a good man. Thank you, Bill.